And welcome to the One More Thing podcast. Today I'm joined with Dr. Troy Doucet.
What's up?
How you doing?
Great,
I
man.
like to leave you hanging every once in a while.
Every now and then you throw me that curve, man. I got to be prepared.
Just to see what you do. So this weekend was fantastic. It was on the parable of the workers in the vineyard.
Yes.
So again, like all the other weeks, I've asked why this specific parable. What was the inspiration for this one?
Yeah, I mean, it was on the planning list, as the basic answer. But this one gave us really an insight to how God, I believe, God sort of views access to the kingdom.
Okay.
And it goes against any sort of notion of exclusivity, superiority, or any sort of privilege one may have because of works they've done or sort of religious ideologies that they've held. This one flips the script on all of that sort of idea of who enters in, or,
right.
So yeah. No,
it's a really good one, and I think what I appreciated about so many aspects of your talk this weekend, but the fact that you took it in the direction that I've not seen anybody take this, because this one's used a lot in examples, and I think that you had the best interpretation that I've heard of this specific parable.
Yeah.
Because like even you mentioned, like this is not an economic structure. This is not meant to be taken this way or this way. It's like what I believe it to be is this. It's no matter. It is a problem, right? Because it's like you have the same situation with the older brother and the lost son. He's like, well, what the hell, Dad? Like I've stayed. Yeah. I worked your field. Like I did the things that I was supposed to do, and you're going to welcome him back.
That's right.
After he squandered all this.
That's right.
And this very surreal and profound moment of the father saying, like, why do you care?
Yeah.
Like he's back. That's the good news. The good news is he's back.
That's right.
I appreciate everything that you've done, but like that's not the purpose. The purpose is he's come home.
That's it.
And I think there's that common theme with some of these parables.
Oh, yeah, you find that line throughout. What I love about this particular parable, I mean, obviously the lost son is a beautiful story because it exposes both sides of that coin. Those who are lost, quote unquote, lost because of a type of lifestyle that may not be in agreement with social norms, but then there's a lost in being too sort of heavenly minded. You're actually no earthly good in that way. But what's unique about the parable that we talked on this morning is the owner, which is a reflection of God, continues to go back to the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And what he does is he empties the marketplace. Like he empties the marketplace of people who need work, who need access to good things, right? And then the big, I guess, crescendo is they're all paid exactly the same. And that in the same way as the older brother that Dr. Bachman spoke of last week, our sense of fairness and justice gets tripped up.
Right.
In that punchline, that zinger at the end of the parable is like, wait a minute. And it's supposed to do that. It is supposed to create within us this sort of visceral moment of like, wait, this doesn't sound right. There's something wrong here. But at the end, what I did was I read into it like, hey, he takes everyone in. And everyone is equal. There's no one left to work in the marketplace because they're all busy in the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's an absolute reflection of the universal salvific power of God, is that it doesn't matter if you followed all the rules, right? I think I said something from the stage, like God doesn't love you because you're good. Mm-hmm. God loves you because he is good.
Right.
And that's a distinction there, that there's nothing you can do. But having boundaries and having goals, having doctrines, creeds, whatever you have that keep you within a certain boundary of your own expectations, that's for you.
Right.
And nothing wrong with that, man. But when those things begin to oppress and marginalize and create inequality in your mind about others who don't hold those same standards,
right,
like that's cool. You don't have to hang out with these people. But at the end of the day, God views you all exactly the same.
Right.
And so it was a highly controversial way to approach it.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because you did say this would have got me burned at the stake.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why do you think that is? What is so controversial about that idea?
Because it's really articulating all shall be well. Like, and in all manner of things, all shall be well, to quote Julian of Norwich. Like, dude, we throw the word heretic around here because it's sort of like a joke, you know, it's sort of like a joke. Like, every heresy comes from the Bible,
Right.
throughout history. It's a certain interpretation that went against social norms, you know, whatever, political norms, ethical norms at the time. And those guys were burned at the stake for speaking out against the powers that be. What I was saying Sunday is, hey, there is no limitation to God's saving power. Not your beliefs, not the prayers you've repeated 20 times after a pastor because you felt bad about some sin you committed, your religion. Nothing keeps you out because it's God who pulls you in. And that is heresy to every evangelical mind. It goes against their sense of justice and fairness. Well, wait a minute. I interpret the scripture this way, that I have to do these particular things to be a part of this club that gets to quote unquote heaven,
Right.
whatever that place is, where I'm saying, no, you don't. There's nothing you do.
Yeah.
You don't earn it. You don't do anything to deserve it. It is a gift that is given, and it is accessible to all people regardless.
So what would you say to the evangelical that says, you know, there's the line in the Bible that says, you know, no man comes to the Father except through me?
That's right. I agree that there's no one who comes to the Father that understands the heart of the Father except through what Christ has shown us. That Spirit of Christ, that sacrificial moment of what he does. But here's my argument. Again, they may be setting up a stake for me right now.
Yeah.
That universal cosmic Spirit of Christ didn't just happen in Palestine. You can look throughout history. I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had that Spirit of Christ, that Christness within him when he gave of himself for sacrificially to, we need to be included as well, people of color. You see it with Gandhi, the Salt Walk, right? Like, throughout history. And I love what Father Richard Rohr says. He goes, the resurrection was not a one-time event in history. It happens over and over again. And I say salvation is not a one-time moment, right? It happens all the time. That's why Paul says, I work out my salvation. And what is that? It's the opposite of sin. I work out my bridging the gap of separation from God on a daily basis. Sometimes it seems far, sometimes it seems close, but that's what I'm working out every day through my own life, my own experiences. There's not a standardized test to get into heaven, dude, where we all get the same questions. Like, how dare someone ask me certain questions that someone who lives in sub-Saharan Africa, like, there's no way that we would live accordingly to the same sort of rules or expectations based upon our just geographic location.
Right.
But yet evangelicalism has made a standardized ideation of this is how you get in and this is how you stay out. When in fact this parable says the landowner goes until everyone's in. He keep even to the last hour. Like an hour left to work, and they were paid exactly the same. And evangelicals may interpret that as, well, that means even if someone confesses Jesus at the deathbed,
on the deathbed,
that's not what this parable's about, dude. It's not about, you know, Charles Darwin, the myth of him having like a
the hole in that argument is like, okay, well, live however the hell you want your entire life, and as long as you say the right words before you die, you're good.
That's right. And again, it gave people, for me, I think the response of our church was the right response. Is that there were cheers. Like, that's the greatest story ever.
Yeah.
Is that if you get there, if heaven's a real place, I've never been, you know, I don't know. But if it is and everyone's there, what are you gonna do? Not go in?
Yeah.
Like, come on, dude. Like, let's be real about this. For me, that proves this power, this mighty power of God to save, regardless of, can my beliefs restrict the power of God because I've, you know?
Well, I think it's very difficult to, it's something that we can't prove, right?
Right.
You know, so it's, I've talked to Pastor Larry about heaven, quite extensively.
Yeah.
And, you know, I love that he doesn't pretend to know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think he has a hope and a belief that there is something beyond.
Right.
And he's had experiences in that. But to reduce it down to like this visualization that we kind of like the streets are made of gold and we all have mansions and, you know, we just don't know. But there is that hope that there is something, you know, this oneness with God that happens after we die.
Yeah.
And I believe that, like, I hold to that. But there was a question I had in my head, and then I went down that. So you've read the book Love Wins.
Yes. Yeah.
So this Love Wins by Rob Bell is super controversial book. It came out, I think, like 15 years ago or something.
A long time ago,
like, and he got so much crap for that book. But he opens the book with this moment. He's in, I believe, an art gallery, and there's this beautiful painting of Gandhi. And he's just admiring the painting, and then he looks down, and somebody had stuck like a little sticky note right underneath it. And I believe there was like a plaque of all the amazing things Gandhi had done.
Right.
And just a little sticky note that said, "Too bad he's going to hell."
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so because, and this is what sparked Rob Bell to write this book, he's like, because he didn't call God the same God, like name that I did, or believe the same specific theology that I believe, but he lived his life in a way that is Christ-like and was inspired by this kindness and this love and grace, a very similar ideology to Christ, but because he didn't believe in the right one, he therefore will spend eternity burning.
100 billion years. Yeah, no, dude, absolutely not. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Like, where's the justice in that?
Sure.
You know, Gandhi had lots of moral problems himself.
Sure.
You know, like, he was quite racist in some ways. But at the end of the day, you know, he did amazing things for his people to get them out of bondage from imperialism and so forth.
Well, look at all the biblical characters that did atrocious things. King David, the man.
None of those guys confessed Jesus as God either, right?
Well, now you're just speaking logic.
Yeah. I mean, let's just be honest about that. Because at the end of the day, I like one of my favorite philosophers, an English guy, Bertrand Russell, lost his faith. He was raised Anglican, and through his own education in mathematics and philosophy, that's a dangerous person, man, like dangerously analytical, was asked, "What are you going to do if you die, Dr. Russell, and God exists?" He goes, "I'm not sure." He goes, "I would have one question. What are you going to do if heaven and hell are like real sort of metaphysical places? What are you going to do with all the people who absolutely wanted to believe but couldn't?" Like, that's a powerful sentiment, man, because I have sat with some of the best people I've known who are not Christian, who atheists, some of the best people, kindest people, smartest people, who have listened to the apologetical approach of reason and logic and faith and so forth, of those sort of things I used to roll with back in the day when I was more evangelical minded, and they've heard those arguments, and there's some dang good arguments. But at the end of the day, they're not very convincing ultimately to a person with a more philosophical, intellectual mind. And I'm going, because they didn't accept and bow and repeat some prayer after me, they have to spend like eternity. Like they listen, they go, "That's interesting, man, but I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. I'm convinced that love is awesome and caring for people is amazing, and all of these things that sort of correlate to what Jesus' message was, but I'm not ready to say, yeah, dude died and then rose again 3 days later. Like, I can't go there." Mm-hmm. That piece keeps them out. Yeah. Like, no, come on. Like, that's harder for me. That's harder for me to believe than it is that Jesus rose from the dead, right? It's harder for me to believe that God would keep people out than it is that God rose Jesus from the dead, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Speaking of philosophy, I've been meaning to ask you this. I figured what better time to do this than on One More Thing podcast. I was listening to an evolutionary psychologist. His name's Gad Saad, G-A-D, S-A-A-D.
Yeah.
And he said one of the hardest things about diving into the world of philosophy is he's like, every time I come up with this idea that I believe is just this profound philosophical thought, he's like, the Greeks already said it. So you being a philosophy major, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. There's nothing new under the sun. You know, we may articulate it in a unique phrasing or using unique, language games, but you're right. Now, Greek philosophy, man, they are the fathers of thought from all aspects of, the cognitive life. But you do have a break, right? You have the pre-Socratics, which thought of existence in a particular way, just very like existential. Like you're alive and you're gonna die, and it's probably best that you never have lived because life is pain and suffering. Like those are the pre-Socratics. I love those guys. Like, Thucydides, Anaximander, even some of the playwrights like Sophocles touch on these. That's but then you have the Socratic ideas, right?
Is that where more of the motivational quotes come from?
So most people are familiar with like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle,
right,
and not Anaximander and Thucydides. But Plato comes around and is like, well, there's this ideal that the theory of forms, right, that exists out there somewhere. And my understanding of reality is based upon this inaccessible forms that exist. And that's where the emphasis becomes on the me, right? My ability, the mind is what constitutes a filter of my sensations. Yeah, I can sense the world, but my mind needs to take those files and organize them and rationalize them and analyze them. Otherwise, they don't make sense. And that philosophy carries on to this day to the I think, therefore I am ideas, which are founded, on a lot of like constitutional principles of autonomy. And whereas the pre-Socratics were all about a communal aspect of existence, whereas
where does Stoicism come into play?
Yeah, so Stoic would be, someone like Marcus Aurelius.
Right. Were they in the pre-Socratic, or were
they would be more of that Socratic idea.
Okay.
So it's all about the sort of inner contemplation,
right,
about one's meaning and existence, and being able to have power over those things that you have power, and to release those things that are of no accord for you. And so it's really about peace. The Stoics are all about that inner peace, man.
Yeah. No, I love it. I try to practice it as much as I can, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, they're still influenced by Plato and Aristotle for sure, man.
So the reason I asked that is because I'm constantly trying to tie philosophy and theology together, because I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
How much of the Greek philosophy inspired some of more of the biblical,
the more modern, Plato all the way.
Yeah.
Most philosophy or philosophical theology you have today is Plato. Plato had this idea that every human being was constituted by sort of three parts. There's three souls, if you will. You had sort of the rational soul, which is the intellectual life. You had what he called sort of the spirited soul, which is like the emotive life. And then he called the most debased, he called it the appetitive, and that's like our fleshly desire. So three, but yet one. Well, what does that sound like?
Yeah, the Trinity.
The Trinitarian, right? And St. Augustine, St. Anselm, they pick up on that, and they're like, yes, that's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Let's tie that in.
Yeah.
But it's deeply Platonic, man.
And again, all of this to ask, there was no internet. There was nothing connecting these people other than maybe some record keeping.
Yeah, books.
But you find
scribes.
these biblical and theological ideas outside of the Bible in so many different places. So if we really want to put God and the Spirit of Christ into a box, how ignorant are we about this? Can't the Spirit of Christ show everyone?
Yeah.
Can't they inspire everyone?
That's right.
And that's my whole point is these ideas are not unique to Christianity.
Absolutely.
So why do we limit the Spirit of Christ to just Christianity and saying going through these specific beliefs and these specific doctrines and believing? Because that's a really tricky road, because there are a lot of fundamentalist Christians that believe, there are Baptists that don't believe Methodists are going to heaven.
That's right. That's right.
And vice versa.
That's right.
So
Because they baptized a baby.
So at the end of the day, there's going to be like 10,000 people in heaven if they're right. It's not going to be very full.
That's right. No, that's an excellent point, man. I said it a couple of weeks ago, where a lot of churches, even local to us, their mission is to reach the lost and love the lost and whatever that means. Like, I touched on that, what lost really means.
Yeah.
And it's not that, dude. It's something very, very different. But dude, you can't, they have a hard time loving the found, as opposed to those who aren't, right? Mm-hmm. In their worldview. And I go, you can't even get the loving the found right, man. Mm-hmm. So don't even worry about screwing up those guys. Let them be.
Yeah. And
what's beautiful about Suncoast community is that you have such a diversity of beliefs and worldview that come here. Talking with some guys this weekend, like, so many people were moved by this message because of its absolute radical inclusive nature to what God's kingdom is going to look like. That, had a guy who was raised Wiccan, was just like, oh my God, dude, that was, and posting it on his Facebook page for people. You got to hear this sermon. Guy raised Catholic, comes up to me and is like, dude, this like ruined my understanding. Because, every sermon is a type of argument that is made rhetorically. Mm-hmm. But it's not to oppress or to marginalize or to leave people out. I always approach every sermon as, how is this inclusive? Mm-hmm. How is this hospitable? How does this create a diversity within our mindset and understanding? Because if it doesn't fit that, then I'll never say it. Mm-hmm. Like, I will never say anything I don't believe. I'm one of these crazy preachers who, I preach what I believe, not what I've been taught.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think it's good, man. You did an excellent job this weekend. And then you're up again.
Yeah, this
Sunday.
Yeah, this Sunday's the parable of the soils, of the sower going out and the seeds fall on different grounds. And you've heard a lot of, again, very standard evangelical interpretations, but this one's going to be pretty radical too, man. So,
well, I'm excited. We got another great weekend coming up at Suncoast, and thank you for being on one more thing.
Awesome, man. Always good.